Good morning and welcome to our NCBA and NCDOJ series. This morning we are going to highlight the Consumer Protection Division, and we have with us a few folks from that division. If I could get each of you to please identify or please introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your background, how did you get to where you are now, and what your current title is.
I'll kick us off. My name is Jasmine McGee. I'm excited to be here. I sit on the section council for the government and public sector for the Bar Association, and I'm also the Senior Deputy Attorney General and head of the Consumer Protection Division here at DOJ. I have a long story, but I will just briefly say that I've been in this role for a couple of years and at the AG's office for almost 8 years. And prior to leading the Consumer Protection Division, I actually led Kendall section, who's going to introduce herself next, where we worked on a variety of issues protecting the public. And I'll let Kendall say more about what that means. But before that was in private practice and really, really glad to work in public service now. Kendall, I'll toss it to you.
Thanks, Jasmine. So as Jasmine said, my name is Kendall Datar, and I'm the director of the public protection section at DOJ, which is part of the broader Consumer Protection Division. And I joined DOJ back in March of 2022. So I think that's 2.5 years now, if I'm counting right. And the public protection section is a little bit different within DOJ. So we are the more forward facing section within DOJ. And that includes policy, outreach, and public engagement. Again, all public facing. And what we work on in terms of protecting the public really can vary based on, sort of different initiatives under at different times. In the past, under Jasmine's leadership, public protection was very closely connected to the work with the Task Force for Racial Equity and Criminal Justice. More recently, we have been focused on youth safety and well-being, a significant part of our work here. Continual work that we do is focused on protecting consumers in terms of scams and frauds, online safety, and then a particular focus on people who are often at risk for exploitation, including youth and sort of older adults. So that's the work of the public protection section. I am a North Carolina native, went to Carolina undergrad, did my law degree at the University of Pennsylvania, and delighted to have been with DOJ for the past few years. And I'll turn it over to Kim.
So Kim Deruta, and let's see how I got here. I clerked after law school for a couple of years. I started at the Court of Appeals, but only there a couple months. The judge I was working for was running for the Supreme Court, so we moved across the street after a couple months. So I stayed there for a couple years and then went into private practice for several years before joining DOJ in 2006, and have been in consumer protection the whole time. I am currently, we have two litigation sections. So I'm the section head for one of our litigation sections, which is technology, healthcare, and antitrust. And trying to think if there's anything else exciting. Well, I think we'll get more into later kind of what the sections do. So I don't want to give too much away, but.
Absolutely. Phil, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. This is Phil Woods. I'm the Director of the Finance, Charities, and Utilities section of the Consumer Protection Division. I have been with the Department of Justice a little over 16 years, 12 of those in consumer protection, and for 4 to 5 years before then represented the North Carolina Commissioner of Banks in our finance section of the department. Before then, I was in private practice for the bulk of my career, with the exception of a brief stint where I was a professor at the University of North Carolina School of Law. I took a little bit of a sabbatical and broke it up. And then, that's been pretty much it. Public service the latter half of my career.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you
Sure.
all for being here. If we'll go ahead and jump in and identify and distinguish the various sections that are within the Consumer Protection Division. So we'll start with Kim, if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So, like I just kind of said a minute ago, we have two litigation sections under the consumer protection umbrella. And so the section that I am over is the technology, healthcare, and antitrust. So we generally handle cases and investigations that would fall under those three kind of broad areas plus some extras. So technology, I would kind of include any of the privacy, data breaches, data security, privacy in general. Robocalls actually is pretty technological these days, so that kind of falls under that. Healthcare could be any of our pharmaceutical cases that we would bring, or just kind of general healthcare, and then antitrust, and it could be any kind of antitrust matter on the technology side, on the healthcare side, on will sometimes be involved in mergers when companies want to merge and that sort of thing. So it can be lots of different things. We also have education, which doesn't fall neatly in those three broad categories, but we do handle some education cases that come up. So it's a lot of different things fit in there.
Okay, Phil, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So the finance, charities, and utilities section covers a number of areas. As the name suggests, we cover all manner of financial fraud investigations and litigations, including cases against consumer finance companies, debt buyers and collectors, mortgage lenders and servicers, and real estate companies. We investigate violations of the price gouging statute during times of emergency. So, what's going on in Helene is prominent on our radar screen right now. We also investigate and litigate against predatory towing companies, contractors, and individuals and businesses that target vulnerable populations, including the elderly, veterans, members of the military. By statute, we also do review of charitable trusts, modifications of those involving multi-million-dollar trusts. We review charitable asset transfers. We also investigate and prosecute charities fraud, and we're involved in all manner of utilities cases in which the Attorney General is entitled to intervene, which has recently been, adjusted so that we don't have an automatic right to intervene, but we can intervene if the Utilities Commission allows us. We also investigate fraud.
As of this recording date, we aren't quite sure whether or not that's going to become law.
Well, yeah, as of this recording date. So who knows? Check back with us later. And so we also investigate fraud related to the solar industry, and we participate in solar-related stakeholder processes, working toward clean energy initiatives.
All right, Kendall.
Thanks. And I jumped into this a little bit as part of the introduction, but again, the public protection section is the forward-facing part of the department. And so we work broadly on public safety, preventing scams and fraud, supporting survivors of crime, and again, really a focus on kids and older adults who may be at risk for exploitation more often. And so a couple of things that I would highlight there is, we partner really closely with consumer protection on that front in terms of outreach efforts around consumer education about scams and frauds, and then sort of wise practices for consumers. And we have been very involved, as Phil mentioned, with the Helene recovery efforts and trying to get information out to the public on that front.
Kayla, I just add, sort of on that theme that Kendall just ended with, that we really try to work across sections where it makes sense, and Helene is one place where it has made sense, but there are others as well. Certainly share resources. And in the case of Helene, there's a piece that was, obviously a huge piece that was with Phil's team with regard to the state of emergency and the gouging investigations. There were things related to technology that fell into Kim's section, and then there was education and outreach and sort of forward-facing policy that fell into Kendall's section, because there was this sort of massive event that took place that was affecting consumers in North Carolina.
Thank you, Jasmine. I appreciate that example because it kind of makes sense, all the various parts. I want you to please explain a day in the life of an Attorney General in the Consumer Protection Division. Does this vary depending on the years of experience? Does this vary depending on the day? Phil, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, sure. And I'll take that in the order of the questions asked. It might work a little bit better if I do that. So all of our attorneys participate in regularly scheduled multi-state investigative or working group calls related to their particular subject matter areas. These, we call them multi-state calls, but they may involve not just our state attorney general partners, but also federal agencies that are looking at the practices of businesses in a particular industry, looking to see if there's any trend of harm to consumers by virtue of those practices. The Assistant Attorney General might provide guidance to the financial investigators and consumer complaint handling specialists in their investigation of complaints that are on our radar because of the nature of it, the number of it, or some combination. The attorney would bring enforcement actions on behalf of the state for violations of consumer protection statutes. These may include participation in a group effort by the multi-states that I was talking to you about earlier, and or federal agencies. We brought a number of cases aligned just us and a federal agency, or us and a number of other states and federal agencies. All of the AAGs, like I'm sure you do, handle criminal appeals in the North Carolina Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. So they're going to be working on that. As Kim earlier said, she was reading somebody's brief. And we also expect those attorneys to be monitoring trends in their subject matter areas so that where appropriate, they can reach out to us and recommend, whether investigation is needed or possible enforcement action. They also, in a given week, can assist the senior staff with responding to inquiries from public officials and the press. Getting to your other two questions now, yes, that role might depend on years of experience. For example, a more senior attorney might serve on an executive committee for one of these multi-state investigations, or might serve as, for lack of a better term, lead attorney on a piece of complicated litigation we're bringing against somebody. But I will say this, everybody in the two litigation sections is going to do litigation of some kind. So it's not like you're, what's the expression from private practice? You're not going to be a first-year associate carrying the senior, lawyer's bags or whatever it is. That doesn't happen. You have your own cases. It just may be, it involves more senior attorneys who are helping you. And as far as, day to day, it can vary significantly. Those calls I told you about, they're scheduled on regular basis. But you might be focused solely in a given week because you're on some hearing calendar in one of your cases. So like any other litigation practice, it can vary considerably from day to day.
Thank you, Phil. Kendall, do you want to provide a little bit of insight?
Happy to. So, Phil talked about the more traditional litigation and the work that's going on there. So again, public protection is a little bit different. We do not have the same number of attorneys. We are a smaller section to start with, and then have many folks on our team who are not attorneys, right? So we're doing different types of work. But so for the attorneys who are on our public protection section, I would say that a lot of that is involved. There can be some managerial pieces that go on with that, sort of the broader team. Certainly because of our public facing role, I think we have a significant number of both internal and external meetings. The external meetings can be folks who are reaching out with policy or legislative ideas that perhaps want to connect with a member of the public protection team as part of, conversations with our legislative team as well. So we have a fair amount of those kind of meetings that are ongoing fairly routinely. And then I think because of our sort of public facing role with both constituent services and our outreach team that is doing, a number of presentations across the state, truly every day and all over the state, it provides an interesting kind of nexus for us to try to bring those ideas, questions, things that we're hearing external to DOJ back to the office and have conversations with, be it consumer protection, other divisions within the section, front office comms, about opportunities that may exist for us to try to support some of that work or ideas just to bring back. So I would say, if I think about my day-to-day, there's a fair amount of that. And then also some of just the managerial piece. And I do think, you think about in terms of like law school, going back kind of issue spotting in that way, like looking for opportunities where there may be a lane for DOJ to help support efforts that are underway in North Carolina.
I'd add two things. One, public protection, Kendall's being modest. There are lots of other smaller pieces of things that public protection also handles, including some programmatic things for the department that need legal review and legal guidance. I'm thinking of our address confidentiality program, for example, public records related issues. And so there are times when the lawyers in public protection are or sort of pulled into those issues and work collaboratively with the general counsel's office or otherwise as needed. The other thing I would say, and this was kind of alluded to by the entire team, is that because we are one of the forward-facing divisions and one of the only divisions that does affirmative work, whether it be on policy or litigation, as opposed to defensive work, one, our priorities are driven by the issues, but also driven by what our principal, what the Attorney General wants to focus on, and also driven somewhat by, as we talked about with Helene, what's happening in the world. And so that means that on any given day, an attorney or any member of our team may have to put down what they're working on and work on what the news cycle is suggesting that they should work on instead. And so I think I'm sure that happens in government for government lawyers, generally speaking, but I feel like it happens more often. I'm just looking at my team to see if they agree and in this division.
So with that said, since the AG kind of determines what the focus area is, I'm assuming that y'all are expecting a change and maybe an unknown change in the new year.
I think transition always brings change. One of the things that I think it is exciting and an opportunity about consumer protection is that, and Phil alluded to this with the multi-states, it is an area that is bipartisan for the most part. That we work with attorneys general across the state, across the country of varying parties, and it's something that matters to everyday people. And so I think we have already heard from our new attorney general that it will remain a priority for the office, and we feel good about the work that we do. And we feel good about sort of the consistency of that work over time across attorneys general. So yes, change to come. We don't know exactly what it looks like, but this work is going to continue protecting the people of North Carolina.
I love that. Okay, so one of the most common questions that I receive when I'm talking to law students, young lawyers, is how do I get a job with DOJ? And it's hard to explain that it depends. So, Kim, I want you to talk a little bit about what are the requirements to be hired as an AG in the Consumer Protection Division, and can you be hired directly out of law school?
So in consumer, now I don't know, I'm kind of speaking just for the litigation side of consumer because I'm not sure about public protection. So Kendall can probably answer that in a minute. Currently we do not have any attorney one positions. And I'm not exactly sure. I think even an attorney one might need 1 year of experience actually. So it is very difficult to be hired directly out of law school. I guess it could be possible. I mean, it would probably have to require some HR discussion, the way they calculate your years of experience. Because I know some law schools are going to this, you can kind of work and get some work experience while you're in law school and that kind of thing. So it may be possible that you do have some experience out of like coming right out of law school, but generally you do need a couple of years of experience. For the litigation side, we do have attorney twos, which is sort of the classification in DOJ. It's attorney 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We do have some attorney twos, 3s, 4s, and 5s. So the 2 would need 2 years of experience generally. And so the requirement is basically that. It's just kind of the experience you come in with. So if you're applying for attorney 2, you would need 2 years. A 3, I think, is 3 years. I don't think it keeps going up in that same, 3, 4, 5, but it's generally the more years of experience you have, you could qualify for some of the higher level positions. And then we like to see, as far as background, that people have done, some public service, have good litigation experience. especially looking for, these litigation positions, that they are coming in with some litigation experience. We do take law clerks. So in some of our two, maybe three, depending on how long they were a clerk. So obviously they do not necessarily have the on the ground litigation experience, but we have had fair number of people come in as law clerks. So those are kind of the sort of general requirements. Like I said, I don't know if public protection I don't know if you guys have any attorney ones that don't quite require the same experience.
Yeah, we do not, Kim. I mean, I would echo what you said there. We don't have any of the attorney one positions. And I would say, again, we have a smaller number of attorney positions generally within the section, but would certainly echo what you say about sort of diversity of background experiences. I think about the attorneys that are currently on our team, all of whom I think have public service background, other various sort of more traditional legal experiences that are, definitely a benefit to our section.
Kim, I want to come back to you and ask you a very similar question, but in the realm of internships, externships. What are the requirements for a law student to get one of those, and do those opportunities typically lead to a job?
So we love our interns and externs. The DOJ as a whole has a very formal summer internship program. And so I would absolutely encourage anybody and everybody to look into that during law school. We generally, for the last few years, have taken on, again, this is kind of on the litigation side, have taken on about four summer interns. Sometimes people wanted to kind of do a hybrid and say work half the summer with us and half the summer either with another section within DOJ just to kind of get different experience, or they want to make a little money and go work at a law firm for half the summer. And we can accommodate that. We're happy to kind of adjust schedules if people are trying to do kind of a hybrid summer. But overall, we generally have about 4 interns during the summer. We also love our externs. So during the school year, we have several law schools that are close enough for people to be able to get here and do externships. And we generally are trying to provide them meaningful opportunities to get involved in some, motions and hearings and, depositions that we have them going on, drafting complaints, anything that we can kind of give an intern or extern to do, we are happy to do it. I know usually with the externships, a lot of schools have formal programs for that, so you can actually get school credit. And we have, I know I haven't been involved with the externship program, but I know one of the attorneys that were, and they actually meet with the professor or whoever at the law school that's in charge of that program. And we have had meetings with them to make sure the student is online to get the credit they need and that sort of thing. And we're happy to do that. So yes, we absolutely welcome any interns and externs. As far as whether it leads to a job, it can. I mean, it is good experience. And especially if you're trying to apply for a job with us and we know what kind of experience you've got as an intern or extern, we have had people get hired onto positions. So I know one I'm thinking of after law school went and clerked at the Court of Appeals, I believe, and then applied for a job, and he had been an intern with us, several years before that. So it absolutely can help when you're coming back to look for a full-time position.
All right, Phil, does somebody want to add something?
I was just going to co-sign what Kim said. I mean, absolutely. I was laughing at myself because earlier before we got on, I could have sworn that Kayla was an intern for us because it's that kind of thing. It's like when you've known someone since they were a baby lawyer or a pre-lawyer, you remember them and you remember when they leave an impression on you. So whether it's in our division or elsewhere in DOJ, I think those internship relationships can be really helpful. So I would just encourage all law students to take good advantage of their internship opportunities while they're in school.
Absolutely. It's a form of networking, and it's a form of being able to prove yourself, what kind of work that you can produce. Phil, I'm going to come to you. If somebody's interested in working in the Consumer Protection Division in the future, What experiences and/or knowledge would you suggest they obtain in the meantime?
Sure. Again, this is more coming from a litigation-centric position. But you definitely want to get as much litigation experience as you can for, in particular, I get it. You know, I was a young lawyer at one time. Maybe the case won't be that complicated. Maybe the senior attorneys throw you in to the mix. But if you can get some experience in motions practice, discovery, in particular, e-discovery, we handle huge amounts of e-discovery in the course of our investigations and litigation. Any deposition experience that you might want to get. These don't necessarily have to be handling consumer protection cases. But you know, to the extent that maybe you can do that, or at least work within Chapter 75, which is the Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practice Act, that's our primary enforcement mechanism. That would be helpful, or related statutes, like maybe you do a pro bono landlord-tenant case. Okay, that's relevant to what we do. And if you can't get that sort of experience necessarily, then getting experience in a subject matter area that translates over to the subject matters that we handle. So even if it wasn't in a consumer protection context, if you worked for a bank or other financial institution, or you represented a nonprofit, or you were involved in hospital administration law or mergers, or did antitrust work, or work for a firm that handled technology companies, you know, all of that could potentially be helpful. And then I'll finish up on that question by saying, just this is in my personal opinion, when it comes to hiring law grads who've been out of school for only a year or two, it really is more about the individual than the experience. Kim was talking about, we've hired clerks before, because she's right. In order to be an attorney one, you have to have 1 year's experience and be a licensed member of the North Carolina Bar. Attorney two, 2 years. Attorney, believe it or not, as simple as it is, that's what it is. But it's a more complicated analysis from our end. And just a case in point, we hired a attorney, as I think it was an attorney two, a few years ago. He had only had 2 years clerking, 1 year at the Court of Appeals, 1 year at the Supreme Court. We brought him on board, and he landed with both feet, started taking on his own cases, and really started to shine and did a great job. And then ultimately we lost him to the FTC. He was so good, right? So he didn't come from a consumer protection background, excuse me, but his head and heart were in the right place. So, you know, if this is something you really want to do, you know, and, you know, you can, I don't know how to say it, by your experience or a combination of that and your interviews and everything else, maybe get on our radar, you know, there's a chance you could get hired.
Would anybody like to add to that? I just want to remind applicants that just because you are qualified, you have the 2 years. I hear a lot of, but I'm not getting the job. I have the qualifications, but I'm not getting the job. That does not mean that there aren't other people who are more qualified than you applying.
Right,
So
that's
keep
the
that in
minimum
mind.
qualifications to even get you screened. In other words, our HR screens, and if you don't have those minimum qualifications, you don't even wind up in our pool of what they call minimally qualified applicants. And then we look at that pool of minimally qualified applicants and determine, you know, which ones we're going to interview. And then from those interviews, which are typically, you know, very competitive, we have you know, it's very difficult choices most of the time. You know, we'll make an offer out of that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, that minimum qualification doesn't mean that once you meet it, you make it.
That's right. And I'm going to throw another question out here for the floor. What do you tell a law student or a young lawyer who is saying, I'm applying, I'm not getting anything? Jasmine, go ahead.
Well, so I'll think on that, and I just on the previous two questions, two other things I mean, and this is probably relevant to the last one as well. I think another thing that we're looking for is someone that we're going to want to work with, right? So it seems obvious, but like, like you need to be someone that people want to work with, that will be a team player, people will want to, spend long hours with if things hit the fan. Um, and and I think you also need whatever the government equivalent is of an entrepreneurial spirit, right? And because again, sometimes the work comes to you more than you want and falls in your lap, but we also want people who can be looking for trends, looking for issues, proposing ideas for ways that we can use our enforcement authority, can use the platform of the office to sort of improve things for the people of North Carolina. So I think those are two things that we look for in addition to those hard skills. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, it is very hard to get your foot in the door somewhere. And I remember being told as a young lawyer, get your job, and then it becomes a lot easier to get your next job, which I shouldn't say as someone that wants to keep all of my people. But it's very true. I think relationships really matter, and people vouching for you really matters. And I can't tell you the number of times that people across this department have called each other and said, hey, somebody's applying for a position in your section or your division, and here's what I think of them. So I think, really building your network around the state builds dividends, and it may not be immediately apparent what those dividends are, but that matters in the long run. So, but sort of more specifically, right, when you're applying for a job, like get on LinkedIn, try to figure out who knows something about that place, who works in that place, who can give you a little bit of insight into sort of how that process is going to work. But it definitely takes a little bit of luck in getting your name off of a pile, I would say. But certainly would love to hear what the team thinks too.
No, I agree. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kim.
No, I do agree too. I have had people even within DOJ, reached out to somebody they knew who I knew, and it was like, do you mind just sitting down with this person and having coffee one day? And it was like, sure. And just kind of having that connection so that person can sort of learn what we do and what we're looking for. And I can't say I've seen that person's application come through on any jobs recently. So I don't know if, they actually were looking for, a change in position or sort of what the motivation for that was. But, we're generally happy to talk to people kind of about what we do to see if it's something that, somebody might be interested in at some point. And we like to share what we do with people. So, I would say just keep applying. I mean, I know it gets discouraging, but at the same time, the more times you do it, and kind of go through the process, even interviewing, I mean, there's a skill to that. And so the more times you can do it, you learn from it, and you kind of, figure out kind of what works for you, and hopefully that translates into a good interview.
Yeah, I mean, I've had other section heads and division heads reach out, when they've interviewed a candidate that maybe was not successful in a position with us, but was a really tough second choice. And, I've told them, they were great. This was a really hard decision, but this particular experience was more valuable to us than this. And then those people wound up getting a job. It's almost like doing an internal reference based on what your impression was. I've had others reach out to me just because I may know somebody from outside of DOJ as a person, have an acquaintance through a business relationship, meaning a legal, like a part of a committee or a group or whatever it is. And they're asking me, well, what do you think? And, give them a positive opinion. And then, they'll wind up getting the job, not because of that reference, but just what I'm saying is it's important that when they hear enough positive feedback from attorneys inside the Department of Justice, that helps push them over the finish line if you're a strong candidate for them.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think when you asked that question, Kayla, everybody sort of nodded their head. Like, people have empathy to that. Like, everyone's been in that position where you're looking for a job. It's a hard position to be in. So just know that it's not specific to you. It's just the nature of the beast a little bit, sort of a vulnerable position to be in. And the other thing I would emphasize is that as you're thinking about internships or externships, Kim had talked about that. That's a wonderful way to sort of pick up on the entrepreneurial piece that Jasmine mentioned. When you're there, not only getting the work, but reaching out to folks and say, would you meet for coffee? I'd like to hear more about the work you do, like really building those relationships while you're there. And I think taking full advantage of opportunities, whether they be in the summer or during the school year, to just have as many diverse experiences as you can in real work environments. That not only builds your network, but also I think importantly gives you a better sense of like, is this the right fit for me personally? Like, is this a job that I'm going to be potentially happy in? Because that's what you want, is a good fit on both sides. So.
Absolutely. Kim, what is something you wish law students or young lawyers understood about your job?
This is a hard one.
That's
So
why I
if
gave it to you,
anybody else,
Kim. I was like, I don't want any parts of that.
I know, I'm like, I don't know. So if anybody has something to think of, I will say, I mean, just not, I don't know if it totally answers the question, but I will say, just kind of given my background, I clerked and I was in private practice and kind of made my way to DOJ many years ago. And I will say I am probably the happiest in this particular role in consumer protection. I feel like I like what I do. I can feel good about what I do. I'm not trying to stick it to somebody, like you do in some particular legal positions. It's just you actually feel like you're helping people and you're helping, all people. And it's a good feeling to have.
Anyone else want to tackle that question?
That was the perfect way to answer it, Kim, because it's, it's a journey. And I guess I would say that, I think this is even true in my internship experiences. It's very valuable to have experiences that make clear to you what you don't want to do, what you're not interested in, because then you can value what you have when you see the contrast between the two. And so I value all of the professional experiences that I had for the times that I had them, and that makes me appreciate the opportunity to be in public service even more.
And I'll just add that this is one of the few times in DOJ interviews where the answer of wanting to help people is a valid answer, because oftentimes our client is a department. So while we are helping people, it may not be the way that people traditionally expect you to help people. So since y'all are forward facing, y'all get to directly help people. And I think that's important to distinguish for folks who may be interviewing. Does anybody have any last thoughts? If not, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much for your time. You've already mentioned that you're willing to sit down and talk about your division with folks who may be interested. So I just want to double check and make sure that is the case in case folks want to reach out. I'm seeing some head nods.
That's
Great.
that's Kim DeRuda. Do you need her email address?
Yeah, home number and email and a home address.
No. Remember, I'm a privacy person. No,
we don't do that. We don't do that. And also it's intern season is gonna soon be. It might be open now, and it closes in early March, or I think usually.
The application period probably closes in January, and then they start interviews.
Don't listen to me at all. Read the documents. Do not rely on this video.
It is on the DOJ website. You can get information about the internship program. Yeah. And the externship, I will say, kind of going back to that, is not as formal. So there won't be anything really on the website about apply for this externship. It literally is just kind of calling up here and saying, do you need an extern? Our answer is probably yes. Generally, but yeah, that is not really a formal program through the office. It's just something that we have, and we're happy to work with the school to make sure that credit is given for whatever is needed.
And public protection does hire undergrads and graduate student interns as well. So if you're if you know anybody that might be a good candidate for the work that Kendall is talking about,
and we actually, one of our employees now was an undergrad intern with public protection and is now working here in a non-legal position. But yeah.
opportunities all around.
That's right.
All right.
Absolutely.
Again, we thank y'all for being here.